Am I ever going to get Belle a boyfriend or Scout a girlfriend? Probably not. As far as Scout's concerned, right now, by federal regulation, we are not allowed to captive breed eagles for falconry within North America. So at this point, we can't do that with Scout. I can put Belle into a breeding project, but if we do that, then we we no longer have her as an educational animal, a wildlife ambassador, and to have a breeding Harris hawk as a falconry bird is, is difficult to be able to do kind of both jobs. So it's best that Belle uh, be my friend and my partner for our wildlife rescue and for our falconry, and not breeding her. Though in the future, who knows? With her, that is a possibility. Well, and I can understand that, but the truth of the matter is, um, the actual regulations and practice um, is the same 50 years ago as it is now, and the regulations were adequate 50 years ago. But every time a falconer finds a way to basically sneak around one of the regulations and is doing something bad, then the state fish and game or the Fish and Wildlife Service has to come back and redo the regulations to plug up that hole in the regulations. And so that's the reason we went from 1 page to 16 pages is because falconers kept trying to find loopholes in order to get around. Now, and I'll be honest with you, if the regulations were the same now as it was 50 years ago, would there be biologically anything that would change in falconry? Would the birds be flown differently? Would there be different birds used? Would the hunting seasons be different? Would anything be different? No, not really. But that is why, like here in the state of Utah, our state legislature is in session right now, and they're in session for I think about 5 weeks, and in that 5 week period of time, our Utah state legislatures will pass between 400 and 500 new laws every year. Think about that. 400 to 500 new laws every year. Um, you and I, we have no idea what those laws even are, and for the most part, they really don't affect us. But most of these laws are based on, okay, we need to clarify. Somebody has done this, and we need to clarify it for the court system. We need to clarify it for the police officers or the game wardens or whoever, so that we change this loophole, that loophole, whatever. Um, for the vast majority, it doesn't really matter. Um, but I can promise everyone viewing this uh, little video here, um, there is literally no way that you and I can go through life and not break state and federal laws. There just isn't a way to do that. Um, Not that we do it intentionally, and not that even anybody is even going to care. But what it does is it gives law enforcement more tools. So if they do need to, in fact, a friend of mine who was a police officer here in Utah, we got to talking one day, and he's a traffic cop and he gives a lot of tickets, and he says, if I want to arrest somebody, he says I just have to follow them, and it says there's no way that somebody is going to drive through town or wherever and not break some infraction which allows me at that moment to pull them over. And so it literally becomes a tool for the government, um, more so than something for safety or something for conservation, or something for biology. It is to make the law enforcement efforts easier, and I'm opposed to that. Really a good comment. Absolutely. You know, I have people want to be falconers, and they come to me all the time. Let me tell you a quick little story. One of my students, he came to me more than 20 years ago, and you know he's an adult. He's my age, and he says, I really fascinated in falconry. I'd like to do this. Uh, you know, what does he need to do to get started? And so I sat down with him, and I spent a good couple of hours with him, and we talked about the facilities necessary and the lifestyle live in order to do this properly. And he was a psychologist. He had both a government practice and a private practice, and you know this guy was working with his clients. You know, he was having 14-hour days, you know, 16-hour days, and was a really a great guy. And I told him, I says, there's just no way to do this. You know, you have to be able to work with these guys for at least an hour or two every day, 7 days a week. And he was living in a condominium in town. He didn't have a place for his facilities, and I basically told him all the problems with becoming a falconer, and that he needed to wait until he retired. And so about 18 years later, I get a phone call out of the blue, and here's this same student of mine, and he basically says, you know, I've semi-retired. I retired from my government job. I just have my private practice. I've reduced the number of patients that I have, and we now live in a home where we have the room for the facilities, and I would like to do this. And I said, wonderful, that's terrific. And so we started him on the process to becoming a falconer. Got him his equipment, his mews, and everything else. And I took him out, and we traveled. It was a great experience for him. He was so excited. And by the end of his first season as a falconer, and he did just fine. At the end of his first season, you know, he basically says, I can't do this anymore. He says, I really want to have a life. I want to be able to travel. You know, I want to basically be able to go places and do things, and I just can't dedicate this kind of time and effort into falconry. And so he says, I apologize, but I'm going to have to give this up. And I says, no need for an apology. You know, you had a bird, you did well for the first year, and we got your bird hacked back to the wild. Okay, you know, now you know. And he's just a really nice guy, but falconry just really wasn't for him. And so I have teenage kids that come up to me, and this says, oh, I'm 14 years old, I want to be a falcon. I said, no. I says, first of all, at 14, you don't have a driver's license, and you have to have a driver's license. You have to be able to drive your bird out to a suitable habitat to hunt it, and you need to be able to do that daily. And if you don't have that, and the second problem with being a teenager is you have a whole life full of activities and experiences, you know, extracurricular activities and girlfriends and sports and all this kind of stuff. You would have to give all of that up in order to practice falconry appropriately. So why don't you come back and talk to me, you know, after you've graduated high school, graduated college, have your career, raised your family, and now you're in a stable position where you can dedicate the appropriate amount of time for these animals. Come back and talk to me, and we'll talk about falconry. So I don't generally apprentice teenagers at all, because they really aren't in a position to be able to be a falconer. Okay, well, first and foremost, I am severely dyslexic, and so that is absolutely correct. I am severely dyslexic. Now, being dyslexic doesn't mean that you cannot read. Being dyslexic doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. In fact, I was part of a research project on being dyslexic, and what they discovered is, on average, people who are dyslexic, on average, tend to have a slightly higher IQ than normal. but their brain processes information differently. And so the normal methods that you find being taught, especially in the 50s and 60s when I was in school, um, those don't work for people who are dyslexic, and they end up falling behind and having real issues. Uh, so once you understand that you're dyslexic and you understand how your brain functions, then you know how to study. Um, I'm a not only a falconer, but I'm a licensed pilot. And when I was getting my pilot's license, I had to study a tremendous amount to get my pilot's license, and I took the written test. And the average uh, grade on the written test is 73. You have to get a 70 or better, and the average successful passing of the test is like I said, 73 score. And I passed the written test with 100, but I learned how to study. So yes, I have a lot of books. I read a lot of books. I do a lot of research, not only on falconry, but all sorts of subjects that I find interesting. Um, there is no substitute for hands-on experience. I don't care how many books you read. I don't care how many YouTube videos you watch. I don't care how what other resources you have available to you. The only way to become truly efficient at anything is with hands-on experience. And so in order to be a good falconer, you do need to get into falconry. You do need to do the research, do the study, pass the test, but then you need to put the years in. I've got more than 50 years with these guys. And to be honest with you, with 50 years of experience in falconry, uh, I probably know about that much of what there is to know about how to train these birds and work with these birds properly. And so it is not something that you achieve overnight. It is a lifelong pursuit. It's very much like music. Um, Someone doesn't hand you a musical instrument and say play and you're wonderful. You every time you play that musical instrument, you learn something new, and you incorporate that and you learn something new. But the bad thing is that everything that for me, every new thing that I learn, I probably forget two things, and so I have to keep going back and refreshing the things that I've learned in the past, uh, so that I don't cut corners. I can't disagree with any of that. That's true. That's very, very true. Are people going to do that? No. Is it a requirement? No. Um, but yes, uh, there is so much information. This is so technical. I mean, just literally to be able to walk over and pick up this bird off a perch, you have to know how to do that. And again, that comes from hands-on experience to be able to identify illnesses, to be able to identify um, the psychology behind how these animals think and how to approach that. It's a never-ending uh, process. So yeah, you're absolutely right. Is it possible to import cottontails and jackrabbits? No, not really. Um, I think the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources would frown upon the importation uh, of what's considered protected wildlife. Uh, they don't want you to transport things beyond um, state boundaries, and so it's would take a lot of paperwork, and I doubt I'd get approval for it. Kestrels are really adorable. They're beautiful little falcons. They're the smallest falcon found in North America. And if your goal in falconry is to hunt grasshoppers and mice, and occasionally a small bird like a little sparrow, that is a possibility for falconry. I personally do not allow my students to use a kestrel because they're small and they're delicate, and you you really need for your first bird to be something that is a large and durable and something that's got a good personality. And the best bird for that is the red-tailed hawk. Um, most people that get kestrels as a beginning falconer's bird um, really get a cute little kestrel, just like having a pet parakeet or cockatiel. And it's not really, for the most part, it's falconry, though they can be. They can be flown, like I said, grasshoppers, field mice, and other small birds. But generally, they're not. They're just kept as ornamentation. And so I would rather you get a bird that's really suitable for falconry more so than a kestrel. Yeah, really common bird for that are there two, which is the sharp-shinned hawk and the Merlin falcon are both small birds that small falcons are larger than a kestrel, but they're not by much. And they're very quick and they're very agile and they're very aggressive. And so it's called the term is car hawking, where you basically drive along and the falconer sits in the passenger seat. And when they see a flock of blackbirds or grackles or starlings, they throw the bird out and let it go after them. So that's I've got an itchy nose. Do I have a feather on my nose, kiddo, from you? Did you give me a feather? So anyway, that's what it is all about. Is it's called car hawking, and those would be the two that would be most recommended, at least here in North America. The Merlin falcon and the sharp-shinned hawk.
How do you, I mean, car hawking, isn't there traffic and all kinds of distractions? Wouldn't that be a dangerous,
Yeah, obviously you're not going to do that in the city. You're going to car hawk out on farm, country farm roads. You drive out through the agricultural areas, and let's say you see a big open field, and there's like 1,000 starlings that have just landed in the field, and they're feeding on the freshly turned over soil. You can launch your sharp-shinned or your Merlin falcon out the window, and it's kind of exciting to watch. And they fly through, and they'll actually, especially the Merlin falcon, has this beautiful flight. Well, they'll fly after the flock, and the flock takes off, and then the Merlin will basically circle underneath the flock and circle and circle and circle underneath the flock, pushing the flock higher and higher and higher, and the flock of starlings will ball together as a big bunch, and as it's going higher and higher and higher until the birds panic, and then once they panic and they start to dive, because up in the open sky they have no protection, and they'll try to dive for the ground, and then the Merlin uses its tremendous speed and flies right through the middle of the flock, and you see the whole flock kind of explode in different directions as the Merlin comes up with a starling. It's like I said, it's a really fascinating form of falconry, and kind of beautiful to watch. You're exactly right. That's a great metaphor. I've ridden motorcycles ever since I was a teenager as well. Um, a big red flag if you go to a motorcycle dealer and say I would like a beginner bike. How about that big 1100cc Kawasaki there? Would that be a good starter bike for me? And if they say yes, leave the store. Basically, uh, that's why the red-tailed hawk is such a great starter bird, because it's a large hawk, but it's not an eagle. It's not huge, but it's large enough and it's durable enough and it's got a good stable personality, very much like Belle has, and it lends itself to a beginner who's going to make a lot of mistakes. And so your motorcycle analogy is perfect. Um, you know, Start off with something that is much easier to deal with, and when you find that that's not big enough for your needs, then move up. That's fine, but don't jump into falconry thinking that you're going to be a world class falconer. It's far too complicated, and you're going to end up killing a bird injuring yourself or injuring someone else. Well, that's very true. I actually have a gentleman who's a Mongolian eagle falconer that does send me an email every once in a while, and I find it fascinating that here's a gentleman in Mongolia. I believe he herds reindeer for a living, and he's an eagle falconer. He lives in a yurt, which is kind of a round tent, and he has better internet than I have. So that says something about technology. We're here in the United States. We're not doing nearly as well as we probably should be. But an eagle is a completely different game in falconry, um, and I would love to someday go to Mongolia and spend a few days out on, on a traditional Mongolian eagle hunt on their ponies with their eagles and hunting foxes and steppe wolves and rue deer and those kinds of things. That would be fascinating. Well, I limit myself to no more than three falconry birds. On my master's license, I can have five. I've never wanted to have five. I don't have that many hours in a day. And so I limit to three. Right now, I have two falconry birds, which is Scout the golden eagle and Belle here, our Harris hawk. And my falcon that I've got, Helen, she's strictly education because of her vision disability, and so she gets handled every day, but she does not get flown. So at the moment I have two birds actually for falconry, and that's a lot of work. So you're correct. Um, I know a lot of falconers that have a lot of birds for falconry, and none of the birds get as much attention as they need. Well, thank you, and you're exactly right. This is why here in North America you have to go through the the research, the test, the facilities, make sure that you have all that you need. But then you are required here in the United States to serve a 2-year apprentice under an established falconer. Unfortunately, um, there are a lot of established falconers that are not good teachers, and so it would be up to the student. If you're not getting the education that you need from your mentor, from your teacher, find another one, because this is so very, very important, and your entire um, practice of falconry, the joy that you will receive from this, uh, is based on the day in and day out skills that you've learned from a really good teacher. So that's very true. Oh, I know exactly why they treated me the way they did. Um, and it goes back to any law enforcement agency or anything else. Um, basically, they are humans, and they get offended, and they run into the worst of the worst of the worst. My son is a police officer, and so I would never have his job, having to deal with the public and the public at their very worst time in their lives, and having to deal with their issues and their problems, can really sour people, um, to a specific group or individuals. And so my situation, I understand completely. Um, the game warden that we talked about was a game warden who had very, very bad experience with falconers previously. And because he had bad experience with falconers previously, he had a chip on his shoulder against falconers. And it was really up to me to help him understand that not all falconers are corrupt poachers who just break the law at will. And because most of us are not, most falconers are very, very good, very respectful individuals who, love these animals and who are conservationists. but there are some bad ones out there. There's some very bad ones out there, and so have a game warden that has had a really negative experience with a falconer or two, and you run into him, and he's got an attitude, then it's really up to us to try um, to lower the temperature a little bit, be a little bit understanding on our behalf, be a little bit kinder, and let them see that we're really good people, and we're practicing an art form that is 4,000 years old, and we're not a bunch of criminals. And so that's the reason. And every time I've run into somebody um, that has had a preconceived idea of who I am and what I do, um, it's always because they have had a negative experience, whether it's falconry, whether it is, I'm originally from Southern California. When I moved up here, there were a lot of people that hated people from California. It's whether it's a matter of I'm not the same religion as some people. It really doesn't matter what it is, what the issue is. If you're finding prejudice, um, and it's our job to sit back and say, okay, I understand where your prejudice and your thoughts are coming from, but that really has nothing to do with me because, here's who I am, and I found that was the very, very best way. I mean, as a teenager, my friends and I, we used to pick up 1960s muscle cars and rebuild them. And so driving around town in a 66 GTO as a teenager, you get pulled over by every cop. Um, and you had to be polite and let them know that no, you're not out here causing trouble and racing around. You're just a good, polite kid. And once they understand that, so that's it. It's just human nature. And so I don't begrudge. Yeah, we don't begrudge the game wardens or the police officers or anybody else for thinking, because they've had a bad first impression, of thinking that we are a problem, and we're really not. And yeah, that's very unfortunate. But these kinds of people exist. It's just an absolute fact of life. And so if you find yourself in that kind of a situation, instead of getting angry, because getting angry and being vindictive just makes it even worse. Instead of getting angry, the very best thing you can do is to step back and try to identify a different pathway. And she got her LPN, that's fine, but I would encourage her to see what she could do to continue her schooling and get her RN. My daughter's an RN, and she had issues as well getting her degree. And again, there was just politics involved, and it took my daughter twice as long to get her RN, but she has it. She's an amazing, amazing nurse, and she's one of the most beloved healthcare providers in southern Utah. And I would agree with you completely. Here in Utah, we have exactly the same situation. Other states as well. These guys are basically, they are law enforcement with a biological focus, if that makes any sense. And so, yes, their job is to write people tickets. Just like the truth of the matter is, you will never see a highway patrolman out on the freeway fixing potholes. A highway patrolman is law enforcement, and his job is to enforce the laws, enforce the rules, and it's up to the Department of Transportation to fix potholes. And so that kind of uh, blends over to all law enforcement agencies. There's just a lot of guys out there that are cops, and that's their attitude as they're cops. And their job is to enforce the law, no matter what the law is. Their job is to enforce it. And the only way that we can get around this, period, and I don't care what law enforcement you deal with, the only way to get around this is to continually making an effort to show them that come to my home, look at my facilities. Let's talk about this. Let me show you how this benefits um, your state fish and game. Um, my 43 years here in Utah, I have a tremendous reputation here. I have zero problems with any of the game wardens. In fact, when there's a new game warden that comes into town, more often than not, one of the existing game wardens says, "Hey, we've got a brand new game warden. I want to introduce you to him." And they'll bring him over, and I'll walk him through my facilities and show him what we're doing. And they get a nice introduction so that there's no issues whatsoever with the Utah Division of Wildlife Resources. Uh, but that's where it ends. The local regional office, game wardens, I consider most of them friends, and they're really nice guys. But when we go up north to Salt Lake to the state office, and we're dealing with secretaries in offices, basically just filling out paperwork, writing permits, that's a different story. They don't know who I am from Adam. They've never met me. They have no idea what it is that I do, and they're just sitting at a desk, and they get this weird request for a permit renewal across their desk, and they just set it aside, and it just sits. I had one education permit here in Utah. It was a 3-year permit, and it took 5 years to get the secretary in the main office in Salt Lake to renew a 3-year permit. In fact, she didn't even renew the permit. The permit, I got a phone call from the secretary that took her place, because she retired, that took her place and says, "We've got this permit sitting here, permit request sitting here, and a check, and it's 5 years old with your name on it. What is this?" And I explained the situation, and they said, "Can you refill out an application again and send us a fresh check, and we'll give you your permit." And so, again, when you're dealing with government bureaucrats that don't know who you are, it can be very difficult. But the only thing I can really do is make sure that the game wardens and the local guys here in southern Utah, we have a great working relationship, and that eliminates a lot of problems. Well, the problem goes back to when I started in falconry more than 50 years ago, there really wasn't a lot of rules and regulations, and falconers could fly their birds whenever they wanted to fly them. If you wanted to go get a new bird, you went out and got a new bird, and there weren't a lot of regulations. When the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service really got more heavily involved in the early 70s, then now there's a bunch of federal laws and regulations that you have to follow. And falconers kind of protested that. I don't need to follow the rules. I've been doing this forever, and game warden can't tell me what to do, kind of a thing. Things that are illegal. How very simple. Our hunting season here in Utah with these guys is September through February. I know of falconers that have started their hunting season in July, and they were hunting literally mama mallards off their nest in the early summer. So killing the adult ducks, and the babies or eggs dying or starving to death. That's illegal. That's inappropriate. Hunting too early in the season means that if you catch an adult, the babies are going to die. And that's been a case here in Utah. Here, where we had a group of falconers that were doing that pretty regularly, and we call that poaching. Um, Having a bird, going out and just getting a bird without a license. There are people that consider themselves falconers that have not passed the written test, that have not had their facilities inspected. They don't have the proper licenses and permits. I know, you're so bouncy. Don't have the proper licenses and permits. And again, that is illegal. Just like any other illegal act, oftentimes, since these are primarily misdemeanors, and one falconer that I can think of just ignored the laws. Was quite well known through the falconry community as a poacher, having birds illegally, and all of that kind of stuff. Got a ticket for poaching. He was hunting in July and August illegally, and basically made it so difficult and so expensive for a $50 ticket cost the state of Utah thousands of dollars to actually prosecute him. And at the end of the prosecution, the fine was you lose your falconry small game license for 1 year, and that's the punishment. You know, you got a bad attitude and you give a game warden a really bad time. They don't like falconers, and it would go the same for anybody that fishes illegally or anyone that deer hunts and poaches illegally. I mean, if you're not willing to follow the rules and regulations, you really should not be involved in falconry. Well, that's and I understand that. I've gone through a tremendous tragic situation here with our Wildlife Foundation over the last year or so, and it broke my heart. And basically threw our foundation for a huge loop. And but lots of days where I was incredibly angry, lots of days that I couldn't sleep. It was tough, but the bottom line is, because we were able to step back, reassess, find a different route to go, our Wildlife Rescue Foundation is moving forward. We're building all brand new facilities here in Enoch, and there really is a very bright future for, instead of the Cedar Canyon Nature Park, a very bright future for now, the Enoch Wildlife Rescue. And so sometimes you just have to sit back and try to find a different direction to go, and we did. And so we're moving forward, and we're very excited.
Okay, that's all I got.
Okay, well, I hope we answered all the questions.
The only thing I think of, though, is if you want to talk about if there's any, I guess, issues or prejudices between falconers and wildlife rehabbers.
Sure, there is. Okay, the question really is, there seems to be some friction, some prejudice between falconers and wildlife rehabilitators. And that's true. There very, very much is. And again, it is primarily misunderstanding. It's not having the ability to work with each other, just a bunch of egos and politics and personalities. Let me kind of give you someone who is a wildlife rehabilitator exclusively. Their complete focus is that every animal has a chance to go back to the wild. And so every hawk should go back to the wild, every eagle should go back to the wild, every owl should go back to the wild, and there is no other purpose on the planet but to return them to the wild. That's it. Um, to a falconer, birds of prey and falconry is an art form. It is historic. It's been around for 4,000 years. Um, Falconers have a passion to develop a very unique and special relationship between man and a wild animal. And the animal rights people have a tendency of not understanding that's a can be a really really good thing. And so there's these two different camps, these two different attitudes, these two different ideologies, and so rehabbers see falconers as exploiting the wildlife, and falconers see rehabbers as kind of a stuffy, stuck up, um, kind of a negative, they get kind of a negative vibe from them, thinking that because they think falconers are bad. And again, this is please understand, this is not all rehabbers, this is not all, but there is that issue in the middle there. And so wildlife rehabbers and falconers need to get together. They really do. They both love these animals, and falconers can be an enormous help to wildlife rehabbers, and wildlife rehabbers can be an enormous help to falconers if they would put their personality issues aside and try to help one another basically do what's necessary. Hi, baby. Do what's necessary for these animals. And so, that's the thing I keep trying to stress here is that we need to work together. And if you can get the local rehabbers and falconers together as a group, that gives you more people to help when either the state or federal government is trying to write oppressive regulations to make it difficult for either. The more we collaborate, the better outcomes we will both have. So that's it. Falconry has been a group uh, of very, very much individualists, people that are more loners, not so much social. I mean, there are falconry groups and those kinds of things, but there I find more of a, let's say, an anti-government type of a slant to their belief system, and more often than not that causes us problems. Instead of my belief is that the first thing you do is you basically go out and contact your regional office for the state fish and game, and be sociable, be friendly, offer to take people hawking, try to get them to understand who you are and what you are and exactly what you're doing, and that goes really a long ways to be able to practice your falconry without any hassles or issues. And so, take a game warden hawking, and he might be hesitant at first, but eventually he's going to find what you do has no bearing on wild populations, and that you understand the laws and the birds are cared for, and that everything's good. And when you see a game warden coming over to your home, he's not to give you a bad time. He's coming over to ask you a question about a bird, shoot the breeze, have a cup of coffee, whatever. But it's more of a social thing than worried about being arrested or prosecuted. Well, it really wasn't that he thought he was going to bust me for anything, because we had already, the very first time, we had already said, "Here's all of my paperwork," and we're in season. Here's my bird. My bird is banded. My bird, and here's all of my paperwork. And so he knew exactly that I was legal. But he had a really bad situation with the founders past, and so he was basically it was just strictly harassment. That's all it was harassment. And again, this particular individual, for all the years, and he was only here for just a few years in southern Utah. And I offered for him and I to go out and hawk and show him what's going on, and he denied those opportunities over and over and over again, and was always cold. Um, the regional director put him in line and told him that he wasn't allowed to harass me. Uh, and so when he left, there was just nothing I could do to convince him that I was not a bad falconer because he had had bad experiences in the past.
Yeah.
And so all I could do was what I could do. Okay, in actual dollars. Um, well, let's just kind of throw some numbers at you real quick. You need a mews. A mews is a building that houses your bird. It's an outside facility. You will spend on average for a single 10 by 10 chamber, you will spend for the mews.
About how much?
Your
You keep every time Belle makes a noise with her bell, the microphone drops out.
Oh, well, okay, about $5,000 for the chamber that the bird is going to go in, called a mews. The second issue is your equipment, scales. If you pick up a gram scale at a thrift store, it could cost you $2 or $3. If you buy one off the internet, it costs you about 25. The leather that you need, figure on about $50 worth of leather. The hood that you see right here, now I make my own, and because they get all chewed up and stuff, so I make my own hoods. Buy these anywhere from $30 to $300, depending on the maker and how fancy they are. It can be that your tracking system for the bird, when you're out flying your bird's chasing rabbits, and it ends up 200-300 yards away in high brush. You got to go pick up your bird. It's nice to have a tracking system on the bird so you can go track it down and walk up to it. Those tracking systems can start at $500 and state of the art $1,500, $2,000 for a tracking system, and that's the transmitter and the receiver and all the parts that you need for that. So realistically, it's under $10,000, but above $5,000, and it really depends on how much you're capable of doing yourself, building yourself, making yourself. Can reduce the cost quite a bit. Your last words, kiddo? Yeah, you want to go back out to your. It's a pretty day outside. You want to go back outside, don't you? Yeah, you do.